Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy. This is the Brad Southard Knives Mini Tolk. This was, as you recall, a knife that I first found at the Blade Show. And it was a very impressive knife there, and it continues to be a very impressive knife here. Let's first off do a size comparison. Right here it is against Spyderco Delica. And of course, for tradition's sake, the Ontario rat number, that's the steel wheel cut jack. Guys, it's been a long day, and here it is against your Ontario rat number 1. So you can see here that the blade is about 3.25 inches. It's a nice little blade, 100%. So that's good. And then a couple of other size comparisons that are a little less traditional. Right here it is against the Millet Torrent, which is another 3.25-inch blade knife that was released at the Blade Show. And here it is against the Grimsmo Knives Rask. So you can see it's actually much smaller than the Rask, but this is notable just because the Grimsmos and Brad Southard are tight, and they've been sharing information back and forth, and in some ways you can kind of tell that. There was some similarities in philosophy. One thing to highlight is that this is number 1. This is the first of the production Tolks to ship. Serial number 1. And this is because, well, I bugged Brad Southard repeatedly after Blade Show, and he decided he would let me test the website, and so this is the first one to ship, which actually is not necessarily going to be a good thing, especially for a brand new knife that's this complex an undertaking. There were definitely some teething issues here. For instance, the backspacer, when I first got it, was so tight as to prevent disassembly entirely. I sent it back to Brad, he fixed it right up, but that's what happens when you order early. So do keep that in mind throughout. I think this particular knife's got some teething pains that, talking to buddies who've got them since, are not present in the later versions. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this particular pocket knife. So on the good side, this is made by Brad Southard himself down there in Arizona. Brad's a very well-known knife maker. He's got he did the Spyderco Southard, the Positron, the Hanan, a bunch of other things I'm probably forgetting. And also he has a very successful custom line. And he's also, by the way, a very nice guy. Met him at Blade Show, talked to him, great guy. And so it's really cool to see that this is, you know, a custom, effectively kind of ish knife by Southard that you can actually buy, because his real customs are really pricey. So there you go. Next thing, the size is great. 3.25 inches is a nice length for carry. It gives you plenty of blade, but not a whole lot of pain from it. But more importantly, this is super compact for carry. If we compare this to the Spyderco Delica, you can see here that this actually fits pretty much entirely within the silhouette of the Delica, which means it's absolutely a pleasure to carry, and thickness-wise, it's right about the same thickness. This disappears in the pocket in a serious way and makes this absolutely a joy to have in the pocket. Next thing, this is a knife where you can buy it and customize it as you're making the purchase. Choosing things like the blade steel, you can do things like Damas steel, or I think PSF 27, other steels. But you can also choose other options, like inlays, like Damascus scales, like all sorts of things. This is a knife that you can really customize to your desires, even though it's not technically a custom knife. I don't quite know where to draw the line here. But this is as custom as not quite custom actually gets, and I love when companies offer you that option. Well, in this case, when one guy offers you that option, that's a great thing. I also love the blade very much on this guy. This has a great blade shape. It's kind of a sheep's footy thing, but it's got some flat, it's got some belly, it's got a nice tip that's designed for these kind of pulling cuts that I tend to use a lot. It has a great steel. CPM 20 CV is, if not the best steel out there, one of the best steels out there for most people's uses. The stock on it is relatively thin, here comparing it to your Delica as usual. Again, it's not super thin, or not super thick, that is, and it is delightfully thin behind the edge. This is a knife that cuts and cuts and cuts and cuts, and that is absolutely great. And so I love the blade on this. It makes it a very, very nice cutting tool. And actually, that brings me to the next point, which is that this continues to have the Southard-like tool feeling. Every Southard I've had has felt like it is a tool first and fashion second. It's a weird thing, but this is no exception. They feel like they're designed to be cutting tools. It's not flashy. It's not an incredible action showpiece. I mean, the action's fine, but it doesn't do the, crazy fall shut thing that actually bothers some folks. But it has that just feeling of like this wants to be used. This wants to be carried and used to cut things and then put away and then used to cut things more. It's not pocket jewelry. It's a tool. And I appreciate very much that there's that. I mean, the Avo had it, the full-size Tolk had it, and this guy does as well. And so I don't know what gives me that feeling. Maybe I'm entirely subjective and crazy, but this has that again, and I kind of kind of appreciate that. Next thing, even though it is absolutely a tool, it's got some very nice details. Things like the lock bar relief cut is internal, which means these lines are not broken up. And actually, speaking of these lines, take a look at these lines. You can see here that there are these nice little milling marks all throughout this entire thing, and they just proceed across the lock bar. They're on the clip. Then on the other side, again, you get that same thing where it spreads out throughout. This is beautiful, beautiful milling and really adds a level of intricacy that's great. Comes with a very nice backspacer with cutouts both on the exterior and on the interior, just in case the blade could possibly touch. It's not going to be touching now. You have a nice milled clip sharing this kind of thing on there. You have great jimping and rounding on the flipper tab, which again makes this carry beautifully. You've got the nice pivot collar that you can choose your own adventure and material on, matching the backspacer, of course. You have a pivot that is itself very unique and interesting, although fixed, so you can just use this Torx screw on the other side, which is, by the way, a nice deep Torx T15. Much appreciated there. Each one is serialized, this one being number 1, and it has nice inner engraving. You can see right here, it says Mini Tolk on this side and then Southern Knives on the other, which is a great way to do that. Those little kind of details make it a wonderful thing. And then it's got things like the tent ramps. I mean, this knife is just replete with little details that show that Brad was really overthinking this knife, and I appreciate that very, very much. Then finally, on the good side, every part of this knife is made in-house. It's kind of like the watchmakers brag about that. We made every element. Indeed, Brad has made every element here. And that's absolutely respectable. He made the blade, the scales, the bearings even. He made the bearing races, which is impressive. And the heat treat is done in-house. This is a in-house made, sole author custom knife. I don't know what it is anymore, from Brad Southard, and that is absolutely something to keep in mind, and absolutely a beautiful thing. So that's the good to me, is that everything is in-house. It's got very, very nice details. It's still got that Southard-like tool feeling, which is reinforced by having a blade that is just absolutely great. You get all kinds of options, a great size, and it is made by Brad Southard in the USA in his little shop down there. Actually, I don't know the size of his shop. On the great side, to me, this guy, well, not to me, it is just objectively, this is a lightweight knife. The blade length on this guy is 3.25 inches, but it's coming in at 2.6 ounces. That is great. And coupled with the carryability, this just disappears in your pocket. Brad has an incredible ability to do these kinds of internal milling to make these knives really, really lightweight, and it shows here again. This is a knife that is like borderline scary lightweight, even though the balance is absolutely great. And so, to me at least, that's what's great about this knife, is that this is super, super light, and I appreciate that. On the bad side, this is a very expensive knife. $600 is your base price here, although the one I got was $695 because I originally ordered it with the Damascus. Look, this is made entirely by Brad in his shop. He's doing everything in-house, like I said. I want to get bent out of shape about a price that high, but considering this against like the Shiro Neon or the Grimsmo Rask, this actually feels like a pretty solid price. It's going to be a deal breaker for a lot of people who just don't want to spend $600 on a knife, but I don't think this price is out of line. I don't think Brad is ripping us off at all here. Next thing. Unfortunately, this is a little bit harder to get. That's the disadvantage of the knife being sole author made by one guy. He has opened up ordering on his website a couple of times, but he's doing, only orders every so often, which is good. It keeps him from drowning, so to speak, but it means that you can't just go ahead and order one at your local store. So that is a little bit of a disadvantage. Next thing, I kind of want a finger choil here. You've got this little area, but it's not big enough even for my relatively small fingers, and I feel like this would be really awesome if I could choke up a little bit further. It's not a big deal, but it's something it might offer as an option in the future there. Next thing, this is very much a nitpick, kind of like the finger choil thing, but some of this machining right up in this area here, I'll try and zoom in. These lines are starting and stopping in weird and kind of unpredictable ways. I don't quite understand it, and there are little areas that appear to be maybe a little chattery or something. The only area of the machining I don't love is in these little pockets here, these abrupt starts and stops. It's just a little distracting and weird, and it's something I hope maybe he can work on in the future. Detail that in a little bit. Now on to actual issues. For starters, the screws are going into this copper spacer, and they're secured there. And copper is not a very hard metal. As you saw in my disassembly, I was actually pulling out little tiny bits, slivers of copper on the screw screw. I don't think it was a big deal. Maybe it was just leftover chips from when it was milled originally, but that's not something I'm super in love with, because the copper can strip out a lot more easily than pretty much any other metal out there. And so it makes me a little bit fearful for the longer term with this, although I'm sure Brad will help you out. Next thing, the clip on this guy needs more flex. It's okay, but it's not a stellar clip. It's got plenty of ramp and whatnot, but every time you are really having to jam this guy down into the pocket. It's not a problem, but it wasn't a pleasure either, and it's something that could be very easily fixed just with a little bit additional milling there. Then finally, on the bad side, the detent on this guy is on the soft side. It's not to the point where it's ugly, because it is 100% still reliably firing, but it's not what I'd like to see, and in fact, if you really give it a bit of force, it will fire open, even without touching the tab. And that's just not what I like to see. And compared to the one I handled at Blade, the detent on this guy is not super impressive. But talking to friends, this seems to have been an early kink, maybe, removed in future versions. And so that's great to hear, but it's not something I love seeing on this guy. And so to me, at least, that's what's bad, is that the detent is a little soft on this guy. The clip does need a little more flex. The screws are going into a copper spacer, which is, I don't know about that. The machining in these pockets is a little bit weird. I kind of want a finger choil, but that's entirely subjective. It is hard to get, and it is very pricey, although I don't really think that the price is bad at all. I think for what you're getting here, it's pretty reasonable. On the ugly side, there is only one issue here, and that is that I would consider ugly, and that is that the heel of the blade here, I'm going to see if I can zoom in a little bit to show you, but the heel of the blade is not actually sharpened down in this little area. You can see here that the plunge goes out just a little bit further than his sharpening choil, which again makes me think, finger choil, please, but it's not quite sharp right down here at the end. It sharpens up by about here, but that's not something I love seeing. It's easily fixable. I'm sure I could do it myself on the Edge Pro, but the simple fact is that for $600 or more, that's not quite okay. And so I missed this little area while sharpening, and at least to me, on a knife this pricey, that's kind of ugly. So let's go into the final conclusions here. Of course, this is a knife that is very good. If you haven't figured that out already, you haven't been paying attention. It's very light, it's a nice design, it's got lots of great details, a stellar blade for actually cutting things. It's got the Southard actual usable tool feeling, which I absolutely appreciate. And for a lot of people, the origin alone, that this is basically a Brad Southard Solothurn knife, is going to be worth that price of admission. This particular unit's got some quirks. It's got a clip that needs a little more flex, a heel that missed the sharpening belt, and a detent that is just a little bit too soft. But talking to friends, I'm thinking I may just be singing the early adopter blues here. So given the design, the construction, and the provenance, it's easy enough to call this guy a gem. This is a very nice knife, and with subtle tweaks, it will no doubt sparkle even more. And practically speaking, this offers a very nice American-made alternative to some of the high-end, smaller flipper frame locks out there. This is like a Shirogorov Neon, but it's cheaper and it's made in the USA. It's like a Grimsmo Rask, although, well, it's also cheaper than that, and it's actually, smaller and purchasable. And you're getting similar pieces from, like, the South Africans, Thorburn, Chellenor. Compared to those, you're getting a real bargain here. And so this is a really nice knife to consider if you're wanting a high-end, smaller sort of frame lock. That said, if you're not interested in the name or the fancy in-house construction, you don't quite need to spend this much money. There are knives like the ZT450, the Millet Torrent, or the Bose Mini Aero that offer very similar action and very nice, excellent, but with a little bit less exclusivity and a much, much lower price. And for me personally, actually, this is a knife that isn't going to stick around. This actually came as a major shock given how good it is, but it kind of revealed something about me, which is that I want my high-end knives, my expensive knives, to be a little bit flashier. And so, even though I've got this guy around, knives like the Millet Torrent with the Damascus and the crazy design, or the Alamic Buska, which has the Damascus inlay and whatnot, ended up getting more pocket time. Those two always won the battle for my pocket. And given that I can't afford to keep high-end pieces that aren't getting pocket time, I think this guy's going to get sold. But that said, it is still absolutely a wonderful knife, with a great design and a whole bunch of good stuff going for it. And so if you are after a beautifully made tool with a great design and wonderful provenance, then I think you should absolutely talk to Brad about picking one of these little guys up. Anyways, I hope this has been interesting to you and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.